Okay, folks, we're at the home stretch. And as colorful as this is, let me just kind of make it a little bit more or a little bit less intimidating. When I do these, I try to color code what I can for you so that it makes sense when you look at these. So I'm hoping that's what's coming through. All right, so let's define coterminal angles. We'll say that coterminal angles are angles with the same initial and terminal sides after complete rotations to 360 degrees or 2 pi, either clockwise, which is the positive rotation, or I'm sorry, counterclockwise, positive rotation, or clockwise, negative rotation. So, actually, I can probably do this now. Okay, so, well, no, let's just say with this. So I started off with 30 degrees. So here's my angle quadrant 1. I go to 30. So do you notice that if I start from here, which is where the angle ended, if I moved it in blue, one complete rotation, I end up in the same spot, right? And if I then continue some more in the green, one complete rotation, I'm in the same angle. And I can continue doing this multiple times. Or instead of me going counterclockwise, I could have very easily have gone this way backwards once, backwards twice, backwards 3 times. It's the same angle. So, which is why I put down here that do you notice if I move the angle one complete rotation or 3 or 4 or however many times, any multiples, I end up with the same angle. And it doesn't matter if I move it clockwise or counterclockwise. And by the way, this is the initial side in my standard position. This is where the angle first starts. This is the terminal because this is where I end. So some of the angles to the coterminal with 30 degrees are 390 because from the 30 I added 360, or 750 in the green because I moved it once, I moved it twice, so I added it by 720. If I went backwards one rotation, 30 minus 360, I went back another rotation, would be 30 minus 720. So here's my rule for finding coterminal angles for theta. It's theta plus or minus 360 degrees n, or theta plus or minus 2 pi n, depending on if I'm working with degrees or in radians. And n just stands for the number of rotations. I could do once, twice, 3 times, it doesn't really matter. So now that we have that, I'm thinking we should try and do some problems. So let's go look at this guy, and again, it's like really confusing. So let's go through one at a time. All right, so I want to find one positive and one negative coterminal angles for the following. So I've got 220 degrees. But what I want to do is I want to add and subtract 360. If I add 360 to 200, I get 560. If I subtract 360 from 200, I get negative 160. So that's my negative, and there's my positive. If I do number 2, 80 degrees, and I apologize, I have no idea why the equal sign is there. It should not be. If I do 80 plus or minus 360, if I subtract, I get negative 280. If I do 80 plus 360, I get 440. I go to number 3. I have negative 300, so I'm going clockwise. If I add 360 to negative 300, I get positive 60. If I subtract 360, I get negative 660. Now, you notice I put down here that for each problem, there are infinite solutions that can be found. So answers will vary because I just asked you for one positive and one negative. If you didn't want to give me 560, if you wanted to add another 360 and give me 920 degrees, that would be okay. Let's say you did not want to give me negative 160. You wanted to subtract another 360. So if you wanted to give me negative 520, that would be okay too. So these are just, for me, the easiest ones to find. But again, there's no restrictions as to what the angles could be, other than that they are plus or minus 360 or any multiples of. So now I go to number 4. And you notice number 4, 1,000 degrees is kind of big. So if you wanted to add 360 and give me 1,360 degrees, that's perfectly fine. But I noticed that this is so big that if I wanted the negative angle, I better start subtracting. So I subtract 360, I get 640. That could be your positive angle. But I still have to keep subtracting because I'm not at the negatives yet. So then I get 280. That could be your positive angle. But again, it's still not negative. So I subtract negative 360 and I get negative 80 degrees. So that's my negative. But if you wanted to subtract another 360 and give me negative 440 degrees as your negative angles, that would be okay too. So there are lots of different ways that you could give me your answer. Later on, we'll do problems where you're restricted as to how large or how small they could be. But that we'll get to in a little bit. All right, so that is number 4. So now I want to look at pi radian form because that, sometimes is what gets people a little bit confused. So let's go and look. I'm doing pi over 3. I want to add 360, but that 360 is really 2 pi. So I've got pi over 3. There's a 1 in front of it. Now, if my denominator is 3, I have to change the 2 pi to 3's because I need to have the same denominator. The easiest way to do this is just 2 times 3. So 2 pi times 3 gives me 6 pi. So now when I do 1 pi minus 6 pi, I get negative 5 pi. I do 1 pi plus 6 pi, I get 7 pi. So my negative angle is negative 5 pi over 3. My positive angle is 7 pi over 3. So again, don't forget to change 2 pi to an equivalent fraction with a common denominator. And let's look at the next one. Because with pi radians, they're always the hardest ones. I'll give you that. All right, so now I got 3 pi over 5. I'm adding plus or minus 2 pi. But because my denominator is going to be a 5, 2 pi times 5 gives me my 10 pi. So 3 pi minus 10 pi is negative 7 pi. 3 pi plus 10 pi is 13 pi over 5. So my negative and my positive. And then my last one is negative 1 pi over 6 plus 2 pi. 2 times 6 is 12, so 12 pi over 6. Negative 1 minus 12 is negative 13. Negative 1 plus 12 is positive 11. So my two angles are negative 13 over pi and 11 pi over 6. Now, this is the most direct way of doing it. There are some folks who, rather do degrees. So if you rather do degrees, you can take this pi over 3. Remember, pi is 180. So 180 over 3 is 60 degrees. So some people like to take the 60 degrees, add the 360 to get 420, subtract the 360 to get negative 300, and then change that back into pi radian form. It's up to you. So now what you're going to do at this point is go look in the classwork file folder. There is a worksheet 1 and a worksheet 2. Worksheet 1 is on practicing with conversions, and worksheet 2 is a practice with coterminal angles. Go ahead and do those. And when you're done with them, please forward them to me on Blackboard so I can give you credit for having done them and also to give you any feedback that you may need to see. All right. So I hope that was helpful with the audio. You give me feedback and let me know if that helps you any. So for now, I'm just going to end this. So go ahead and exit out of this session. Go ahead and go on to the classwork. And I will see you the next class. Bye-bye. Video 3.